Hi, I'm Allison. The day I finally moved into my very first home, the one I'd bled sweat and tears to afford my own mother slapped me. Not for anything I did, mind you, but for what I refused, she demanded. I hand over my hard-earned $140,000 savings to bankroll my sister's extravagant honeymoon in the Maldives. Can you believe it? Then adding insult to injury, they orchestrated a fake housewarming party, a cruel setup to publicly shame me. They canceled it behind my back, spread vicious lies through forged emails and messages, and even dragged me to court. All because I dared to say no. But even worse than the blatant betrayal was the insidious, quiet way they went about it, smiling sweetly while secretly selling off my worth behind closed doors. Now I'm asking you, what in the world would you do if your own family punished you so brutally for simply choosing yourself? If this story hits a little too close to home, smash that like button, share your raw thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the full, unvarnished truth. The walls of my new place were bare, the furniture sparse, but to me this house, this small 2-bedroom bungalow in West Charleston, with its creaky floors and the promise of fragrant lemons from the backyard trees, was absolutely perfect. It was mine after 3 grueling years of working late shifts, skipping precious vacations, and constantly saying no to little luxuries just so I could finally say yes to this. It wasn't much to some, I knew, but to me it was everything I had painstakingly built with my own 2 hands. For a fleeting moment, standing in the quiet hush of the early evening sun filtering through the windows, a wave of pure, unadulterated pride washed over me, settling deep in my chest, like a comforting cup of warm tea. Then the incessant ringing of the doorbell shattered the peace. I'd invited a few close friends, my supportive coworker Noel and my rock of a partner Daryl, whom I'd been with for 2 wonderful years. Nothing fancy, just a small, intimate gathering with some boxed wine, frozen mini quiches, and mismatched folding chairs. But the faces that appeared at my doorstep weren't the ones I'd texted. Instead, a flood of relatives I hadn't seen since my uncle's somber funeral. A few long-lost neighbors from my childhood street, and even Mrs. Davison, my old high school geometry teacher, poured into my humble abode. And they all greeted one person with an almost reverent enthusiasm. My mother, Lorraine. Lorraine glided through my brand new home as if she owned the deed, air-kissing distant cousins, directing them to the fridge with a practiced wave, and flashing that practiced politician's smile, the one that never quite reached her cold eyes. She was draped in a soft pink wrap dress and a gaudy gold necklace I'd never laid eyes on before. Beside her, Tiffany, clutching a mimosa, like a Hollywood starlet at a press junket, looked utterly out of place, like she belonged at a swanky Malibu brunch, not in my modest South Carolina starter home. "Mom," I said, my voice tight as I carefully pulled her aside into the hallway. "What in the Sam Hill is going on?" "Oh, honey, Pa," she said with a saccharine laugh that didn't fool me for a second, patting my shoulder like I was a toddler who'd just asked a silly question. "You've worked so incredibly hard. I just thought you deserved a real celebration. I just sent out a few invites, though." A few. The place was packed tighter than a can of sardines, shoulder to shoulder with people I barely recognized. My own house felt alien under the suffocating weight of the noise. "You should have told me," I muttered, the hurt welling up inside me. Her smile faltered just a hair's breadth. "You're welcome." She clipped out the sweetness gone. And then she did it. She casually clinked her wine glass against the edge of her ridiculously oversized bracelet, and the cacophony in the room abruptly ceased. "I'd like to make a quick toast," Lorraine announced, her voice amplified just enough to command everyone's attention. I caught Daryl's eye across the crowded room. He stood near the windows, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his gaze filled with that familiar, "Are you okay?" when concern. I gave him the faintest nod, a pathetic reassurance that didn't even convince myself. "To Allison," my mother began, her voice dripping with a false warmth, "my strong, beautiful daughter who has finally moved into a place of her own." "Bought," I corrected under my breath, the word a bitter taste on my tongue, but she steamrolled on, undeterred. "After many years of incredibly hard work, we are all so unbelievably proud of you. Your father and I always knew you'd make something of yourself." A smattering of polite applause filled the awkward silence, punctuated by a few mumbled, "Congratulations." Then came the sickening shift, the gut-wrenching pivot. And as a mother, she continued, her voice suddenly thick with manufactured emotion. It brings me such profound joy to support both of my daughters and bride in their journeys. So after some very careful thought, your father and I have decided to give Tiffany the remaining $40,000 from Allison's wedding fund to help with her honeymoon in the Maldives. The room plunged into absolute silence. My first reaction was disbelief, a hysterical urge to laugh. It had to be a joke, right? I frantically scanned the sea of faces, searching for a shared smile, a knowing glance, but nobody laughed with me. "I'm sorry," I stammered, the words tumbling out loud enough for the entire room to hear. My mother offered a sickeningly gentle smile, like I was the one overreacting. "You don't need it right now, sweetheart. And Tiffany's wedding is coming up so fast. She and Nathan want to start their marriage with a beautiful memory. That money is mine," I snapped, the raw fury finally breaking through the shock. "You and Dad gave it to me 3 years ago. It's in my personal account." "Technically," Tiffany chimed in, her voice dripping with a faux sweetness that made my skin crawl. "It was always meant for a wedding if you're not using it." I whirled on her, my voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "You blew through your college fund, your startup loan, and now you want mine too. Are you serious?" Tiffany's perfectly glossed lips curled into a sneer. "Maybe if you weren't so darn uptight about everything, you'd understand what generosity looks like." A wave of heat surged up my neck, my hands beginning to tremble uncontrollably. I could feel the prickling sensation of whispers all around me. Co-workers, distant family, complete strangers, all watching this horrific scene unfold like it was some twisted reality show. "I earned that money." I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "I budgeted every single penny. I even planned to use part of it for a down payment on—" "Don't make a scene, Allison." My mother's voice dropped an octave. A dangerous warning. "You've already done that for me." And that's when I snapped. "I'm done," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to hit me and steal from me and pretend it's love." No one moved, not Tiffany, her face a mask of cold entitlement. Not my father, who stood silently near the back, a mere shadow in the unfolding drama. Not even the server, who had just placed a tray of stuffed mushrooms on a nearby table. But someone did move. A woman near the makeshift bar, a distant cousin I barely knew, pulled out her phone. I saw her mouth the word assault into the speaker. A moment later, she looked directly at me and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of solidarity. The faint wail of sirens wasn't far off. My mother's face paled, the color draining away like water. I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. And when the flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of my living room, my sanctuary, I didn't hide either. The ride to the police station wasn't long, but it felt like an eternity. The patrol car reeked of antiseptic and cheap rubber floor mats. The officer behind the wheel didn't say much, just offering soft instructions and the occasional assessing glance in the rearview mirror. I sat ramrod straight, my cheek still throbbing with the phantom sting of my mother's hand, the echo of the slap resonating deeper than just skin. My palms were pressed flat on my lap, desperately trying to contain the tremor that threatened to erupt somewhere between the crushing weight of my mother's hand and the garish flashing lights. Something fundamental had irrevocably shifted within me, and I could feel it cracking, splintering with each passing red light. Once inside the sterile, impersonal station, they offered me water and a tissue. I declined both. I wasn't crying, not yet. The officer who took my statement, Detective Reynolds, was surprisingly kind, his voice soft and even. He didn't treat me like some hysterical daughter or an emotional train wreck. He listened intently as I recounted the unbelievable events, the announcement about stealing my wedding fund, the slap that followed my refusal, the sheer audacity of it all. He blinked just once. "Did you feel physically endangered?" he asked gently. "No, not in that exact moment," I replied, the humiliation a bitter taste in my mouth. But I felt utterly, completely humiliated. It wasn't just the slap, it was the entire setup. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You want to press charges." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because a part of me still couldn't fathom that this was actually happening, that my own mother had struck me. But then the memory of Tiffany's smug smirk, my father's deafening silence, the way my mother's voice had dripped with false pity, as she called me selfish. It all flooded back. Yes, I do, I said, my voice firm, despite the tremor in my hands. I signed the report, took a copy, and asked if there was anything else I needed to do for now. No, Detective Reynolds said. We'll issue a citation. She'll have to appear in court. I stepped out of the station a little before 7:30 p.m. The sun had dipped below the horizon, but the oppressive heat still clung to the asphalt. Daryl wasn't waiting outside. I hadn't asked him to come. I needed to face this alone to process the enormity of the betrayal, without the comfort of his presence. I drove myself home in a heavy, suffocating silence. My house was still a disaster zone, littered with the remnants of their cruel charade, half-filled plastic cups, crumpled napkins clinging to windowsills. Even a muddy heel print marring my pristine white entryway rug. My stomach churned at the sight. I hadn't even gotten to celebrate my achievement. I sank onto the edge of my bed and finally picked up my phone. 37 missed texts, 9 voicemails, and a dizzying number of notifications stared back at me. I opened the first thread, the dreaded family group chat. "Allison, you embarrassed yourself," one message screamed. "You didn't have to make such a scene. She's your mother. Have some respect. She didn't mean it." Tiffany predictably remained silent in the chat. Her dirty work always done behind the scenes. I scrolled through the attached screenshots. Blurry context-free photos of me standing there, arms raised in shocked disbelief. My face twisted in a rictus of pain, just visual ammunition to fuel whatever twisted narrative they were concocting. Then I saw the public post. A cousin, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, had shared a venomous note on Facebook. "Some people think they're better than the rest of us, but disrespecting your own mother in front of friends, I don't care how independent you think you are, that's just trashy." Hundreds of likes, a mix of family, casual acquaintances, and complete strangers piled up beneath it. They were crafting their poisonous narrative before I'd even left the police station. And they weren't finished. Around 9:00 p.m., a message popped up from Janet Connors, the head of a nonprofit I'd worked with on a marketing campaign 2 years prior. "Hi, Allison. I hope everything's okay. I just wanted to let you know we're going to pause the rollout for the fall campaign until further notice. I heard a few things, and well, I think we should give it some space." I reread it 5 times, paused the rollout, heard a few things. A cold dread washed over me. I opened my email, sifting through the usual spam newsletters and receipts, until I found a new chain labeled Potential Behavioral Concerns. FYI. It had been forwarded from someone named Brittany. Tiffany's notorious gossip of a college friend attached was a 3-sentence summary of my supposed emotional instability, dredging up an old rumor from when I was 21 and battling stress-induced anxiety. Brittany, at Tiffany's behest, had painted me as mentally unfit, suggesting that clients should be alerted for their own protection. I felt my lungs constrict, a suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. She had gone there not just to strangers, but to my livelihood, to the very thing I had worked so tirelessly to build. I sat at my kitchen island, staring blankly at the screen as the minutes ticked by, each one a hammer blow to my already shattered sense of self. Finally, I closed the laptop with a soft thud. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't call Daryl or Noelle or even Carmen, my fiercely protective lawyer friend. I just whispered into the empty room, "So that's the game." Because it wasn't about the money, it wasn't even about Tiffany's precious honeymoon or the disastrous housewarming party. It was about control, about systematically breaking me down in a way that made them look justified. My mother had slapped me once. A brutal physical blow. Tiffany was planning to make sure the world slapped me over and over again until I stopped standing, but she had severely miscalculated. I don't crumble. Not quietly. Not in the dark, and certainly not for the comfort of the very people who had set the fire and were now asking why it was so hot. They didn't just want my money, they wanted to destroy the very reason I had earned it in the first place. I barely slept that night, the events of the evening replaying in my mind like a horrific, endless loop. Every cruel word, every venomous glance, every whispered judgment. At some point around 3:30 a.m., I dragged myself from the couch to the bed, but sleep remained elusive. I stared at the ceiling, willing the chaos in my mind to fade, but it didn't. It simply morphed into a new insidious shape. By 8:00 a.m., I was hunched over my kitchen table, nursing a mug of bitter, lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Daryl. "We need to talk now." I froze. We hadn't spoken since the disastrous party. He had left quietly, his face unreadable, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. The kind of silence that doesn't break. It settles heavy and foreboding. I stared at his message, my thumb hovering over the reply. Then I typed, "Come over, Daryl. I think you should come here instead." I drove to his apartment without even brushing my hair, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. No makeup, no armor, just me raw and stripped down like someone who'd been hit by a Mack truck, but kept walking because no one bothered to check if she was okay. His apartment was quiet, the curtains drawn, casting the small space in a dim, unsettling light, as if he hadn't touched them since the night before. He opened the door, his face etched with worry, then stepped aside without a word. I walked in. On his coffee table sat his laptop, open to a file displayed ominously mid-screen, proof PDF. I didn't ask. I didn't sit. I just stared at the damning image. He pointed a trembling finger. "Someone emailed this to me around 2 a.m. from an anonymous account." He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. His eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Your mom and sister were CC'd." "No message, just this soul." I stepped closer, my stomach clenching into a tight knot, even before I fully registered what was on the screen. There I was, or at least someone who vaguely resembled me, pressed up against a man I had never seen in my entire life. Some were blurry club shots. Others were crudely posed bedroom selfies. My face was clearly amateurishly photoshopped in. The lighting was all wrong, the necklines didn't match, and in one particularly ridiculous photo, the imposter, me, was holding a glass of red wine with 2 right hands. I let out a breath that was more of a choked half-laugh. "Are you kidding me? They're ridiculous." "Dal?" "I know," Daryl said softly, his gaze searching mine. But they sent them." "And you wondered," I finished for him, the hurt lacing my voice. He looked up sharply, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I didn't wonder, not for a second, but I needed you to see what they're doing." I finally sank onto his worn couch, my legs too shaky to hold my anger upright any longer. "They want to make it look like I'm unfaithful, so I look unstable, a liar, a manipulator." He nodded slowly, his face grim. "They want to break everything around you, your career, your reputation, us." I didn't speak. The silence between us was heavy, thick with unspoken fears and the weight of their relentless malice. This wasn't just about one fight. This was a calculated, coordinated, cowardly campaign. "Tiffany's the one who pushed this," I finally said, my voice flat and cold. "My